Oh my god, every time I say part 2, the echolalia just wants me to say electric boogaloo, so here it is. Digitally sculpting a doll in Nomad Sculpt part 2, electric boogaloo. It's not actually electric boogaloo, it's actually channels and joints. So this is something I got asked for so much. This is the thing that people DM me the most questions about. And again, like I told people in my DMs, a lot of this is personal preference, and so much of this is trial and error. And even what I'm going to show you today, it still is trial and error. There's still going to be iterations of your doll. You're going to probably have to redo some of the joints, probably like adjust things and etc, etc. But like this series is probably going to be, you're just kind of getting a look at my process and how I sculpt things, and maybe give you an idea how to jump off and like make things yourself, or you know, just give you an insight into like kind of some of the work that goes into actually digitally sculpting a doll. So without rambling anymore, let's get right into it. So yeah, last time we did the blueprint and the block out for this doll, and today we're going to be obviously jointing and channeling, which is going to take our shape from basically what is essentially a figurine at this point in multiple parts and turn it into an actually posable, movable, jointed sculpture, aka a ball jointed doll. So yeah, we left off with a pretty basic block out shape last time, so let's take it up a notch. Jumping right in, we don't need the head for this video or this part of the process, so I'm just going to go ahead and hide everything having to do with the head right now. I really don't want it to be in the way while I'm doing everything else, so this is just honestly easier for me. You don't have to do it this way, of course, but yeah, this works for me. So to get a feel for the details and how I want the joints to look and sit, I'm just going to add a few small details to the body and to the pieces. I'm going to use the clay tool to give it some basic collarbones, shoulder blade shaping, a small like neutral-ish type chest. Just a few small details. I'm really not going for anything very defined in this doll. I want everything to be kind of soft. So once I kind of add in this clay kind of harshly, I'm just going to use the smooth tool to kind of even everything out. The next tool I use quite often is the crease tool. This is the tool I use probably the most when I'm putting details in. I use the clay tool actually not that much, except for right at the beginning like I just did. But first thing I'll do with the crease tool this time is go ahead and create a belly button. This doll is going to have one of those like line type belly buttons, like she's very chunky, or he or they are very chunky, and they wouldn't have like outy or very small belly buttons, so it's kind of like where the chunkiness kind of folds over. So yeah, crease and a little bit of drag tool kind of get me the result I'm going for here. Before I cut into stuff, I'm realizing that, in my opinion, I think they're a little too short. So instead of being like chibi, it's just giving a little bit disproportionate. I think this is once you add, like I added the head on, I could kind of see how short it really was in comparison to the head. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull the knee joints and stuff down a little bit and then adjust the thighs to be a little bit longer, just like that. Also, last time I took the butt in a little bit, but I actually still think it needs to be smaller, which is very like unusual for me. If you've been around, you know I love a doll with a butt, but I think in this case, this might just be just a little bit too much. So I'm just going to take it in a little bit. Okay, a little bit. Yeah, I think that looks better, but you can let me know what you think, but I think it looks better. I'm also noticing the knees are a little bit misaligned, so I'm gonna go ahead and just adjust those. I'm really glad I caught this now before I had the channels in, because that would have sucked to have to redo all of that. No, thank you. Okay, enough tweaking. I think that's good. I think they're cute, right? So let's go ahead and actually start putting in channels and joints at this point, because we have not even started, but you know. So my favorite way to start is by selecting all of the body pieces and switching the material to dithering. You can also use X-ray vision. I prefer this for this stage of shaping stuff and getting stuff going. Yeah, switch to dithering and then lower the opacity. And this is going to make your piece like transparent. So at this point, it's also a good idea to have like all of your pieces in a different color. Like I like all my meshes to be different colors because then I can super easily see where things are intersecting and like how things are sitting inside of each other. Now that I can see the entire inside of the doll, I can go ahead and kind of, the channels, I basically just use a cylinder. So I'm gonna go clone one of my cylinders and I'm going to pull it over and kind of just adjust the shape until it's reasonably thin enough and like long enough for the piece. So channels are kind of interesting. So you can do them really thin, but if you're 3D printing especially, you run the risk of it being too thin and you're not able to get a strong enough elastic through, because if the channel's too narrow, you can only get like jewelry elastic through, and then that's not strong enough to kind of hold the tension in your doll. So that's like the con of a thin channel. The pro is that the dolls tend to be pretty sturdy when the channels are smaller, especially if the channels are smaller further down, because then they're bottom heavy, meaning they're sturdier. They're like, when a doll is top heavy, they tend to fall over if they're not engineered properly. So now if you make the channels too big, the pro to that is you are going to be able to get whatever tension elastic you need in there. Again, the con is your doll might be, number one, too light at the bottom and prone to falling over. And number two, if it's too thin, you're running the risk of, number one, your piece is chipping, and number two, your piece is warping. So if the pieces are thinner, even when they're fully cured, if they're like strung very tense over time, it can create like some bend in the resin, especially if like where you live undergoes like a lot of temperature changes. There's a lot that goes into this. Finding that perfect balance for your doll is something that really comes with time and often like, again, trial and error. So also I used to go like piece by piece when I was making these. Meaning like I would cut the channel out, like line up the channel and then cut it out of like the thigh, and then I would go and cut the shin and whatever. That is not the way I recommend doing this. I now will make like my whole skeleton essentially. I don't merge all the pieces together, but I basically just have the whole cylinder skeleton that I can use to cut pieces out. This kind of keeps my channels more aligned in a way and centered more in a way that the doll is less likely to be kicky or buckle or unbalanced or anything like that. And the other goal of this is keeping all of your cylinders connected together, like as in touching. Like if you have the end like this, they're different sizes, okay? But in the end like this, you don't want them to be like this. You want ideally this at the very, like this at the, you see what I mean? Like they should be, they need to be connecting well or you're gonna have issues. As for the shape, like you're kind of going for here, you can kind of look at the shape I'm making, or you can basically refer to any BJD stringing guide that's basically ever existed, and you'll get an idea for how the string channels are supposed to look. But here's how mine are going to look, at least in this iteration. I think it's going to be good. But before we cut out the channels, we're going to cut out the joint sockets. The joint sockets are the pockets in which the joints sit. And the way we're going to be doing this is by cloning the piece, like say example, look at each mesh and what it needs cut out of it. For example, I'm going to clone my bicep piece and then hide the clone. Then I'm going to select my chest piece and I'm going to merge it with the hidden bicep, which is going to cut the shoulder socket out. So you need to do this basically everywhere there's overlap. So for me with this doll, I would cut the bicep out of the chest. I would cut the forearm elbow out of the bicep, the wrist out of the forearm, ankle out of the calf, okay. And I would cut the thigh piece out of the calf as well. And then I would cut the butt with the hip balls, like the belly piece with the hip balls out of the thigh piece. Oh, and I would cut the butt piece out of the chest piece. And at that point, everything should basically be nestled into a socket really nicely. If you've done it well. It sounds, I was gonna say that sounds easy. Maybe it doesn't. I hope it does. Yeah, it's very repetitive and tedious, and you need to check to make sure that your pieces aren't too thin, because if your socket is too thin around your joint, it's going to crack and break. It's not going to work properly. So it's interesting. It can cut to kind of a sharp edge. That's fine. Just make sure you're kind of smoothing out the bottoms of these like flat, like sharp edges, and make them a bit flatter before cutting it out. Just thicken up the piece either with the drag tool or with like some clay or with the inflate tool around the joint and smooth it, just to make sure you're giving like a tough enough socket, because yeah, otherwise it's just going to crack and break, and it's going to be, well, it's not going to be good. Also, every time I do a cut at this stage, I'm going to turn the piece opaque using the materials and just switch it back to like its normal one and pull it to the side so I can check the cut and the edges, and then I just double click on like to undo and just send it back into its spot. Just to make sure I've cut it properly and I'm happy with the cut. You don't want to find out 20 cuts later that you messed up this cut, and now you have to either remake that piece or like spend time adjust it. It's a pain. Just check it as you go. That's just the easiest, best way to do it, I think. Okay, so at this point we have all our joint sockets, and it's now time to cut out all of our cylinders to make our joint channels. So you're gonna clone and hide your cylinders, and then you're going to go piece by piece. So I like to start with maybe the calf piece, but you can start with the arms. It really doesn't matter. And we're going to do this the same way by hiding the cylinder piece, like the cloned piece, and then merging it with the piece, like the calf, for example. And again, check your cuts every time. You want your cut to be kind of centered on your piece. So if you cut it and you're seeing that it's not centered, you probably have to adjust your skeleton a little bit to make it centered. So do that and then go back and redo your cut. Also, what's really nice about sculpting digitally, like over traditionally, is you only have to do this once. So for each thigh, like you just have to do one thigh, because we're just going to mirror it later to make the second thigh. As far as mirroring your parts, please make sure you're mirroring like based on local and not world, or you're going to end up with like two pieces like a mile apart from each other. And when you get to the center pieces, aka like your torso, your chest piece, belly piece, it switches up a little bit. You want your cylinders to be really like centered in the pieces, and you want to check like say the shoulder socket to make sure your joint is coming out the middle of your shoulder socket. But you're going to cut your pieces the same way with the hidden mesh, etc., etc. So you're going to cut out your meshes the same way we've been doing. Then once your pieces are cut, you're going to mirror just to make sure it's perfectly symmetrical. If you need to use the gizmo tool and realign, do that the same way we did before. And once it's centered, you can like mirror local symmetry, and then your piece will be like perfectly cut out. Especially important for like after cutting out the joint sockets and stuff, it's only going to be cut out, say for example, on the shoulder on one side. So you have to cut it or symmetry it, and then you get the joint and the channel perfectly even on both sides. Also, make sure that, say you're doing this for the chest and then for the butt piece, make sure you're doing this like the same way. So if you're doing like left to right on the chest, do left to right on the bottom too. I just do based on wherever I've cut the pieces out and just cut from the same side and then flip it. Otherwise your pieces may not align properly unless you've been perfectly symmetrical every single time and cut out the joint sockets from both sides every single time. Yeah. So if you need to adjust channels or anything to like take a little bit of weight off the middle or off the top or whatever you need to do, you can do that like at this point. And also it's gonna be a little difficult in many cases to keep things 100% up and down because bodies just aren't built that way. So if you need to lean a channel a little backwards or forwards or whatever, especially like in the calves to keep the ankle and the knee lined up to center, you can slant it just a little bit. Do it as little as possible while maintaining the thickness and weight and stuff of each of your pieces. Oh my God, please make sure you have autosave on. That's another thing because I used to turn it off because it annoyed me, and then I lost a 4-hour sculpting session because I was so into it I forgot to save manually. Just keep autosave on. Ignore, it's annoying, it pops up. Just, oh my God, just leave it on. Just leave it on. At this point, the channels would operate with elastic to hold your doll into kind of a fixed position with like a tiny bit of movement. The ability to move does come from the joint and the joint socket, but it also comes from these slots. So the first thing I'm gonna do is make my slot cutter. Now I have one of these like auto-saved, but I'm just gonna show you how I make one so that you can make one. It's insanely easy. Some people just squash a cylinder down, but I don't always love the shape of that. And you can do like fancy shapes, like you can put like little stars or moons on them if you want. I don't like that because I think it makes the piece, or can make the pieces more prone to cracking. Sharp edges where you have elastic can cause like if you have a star, for example, it can cause the elastic to like over time wear out like way faster than it would otherwise, or get snagged or like chip pieces off, and I'm not a big fan of that. But you can do that if you want. I'm gonna keep it simple, and I'm just going to attach a cylinder onto like a box, essentially. Once they're sized the same, basically when you hit the halfway mark up the cylinder with the square, they're going to like sit together pretty nice and flush. Merge them together, smooth your edges if you need to. You can round them out, you can do whatever. And then we're going to take that piece and resize it to fit the joints and fit the channels. So I'm going to quickly switch all my pieces back to being see-through, like all my body parts, and I'm going to keep my cutter like black the same way I did with all of my joint channels, just so I can see them properly and like make sure things are cutting where I want them to cut and all of that good stuff. You want to keep the rounded bit, if you're using it, or the shaped bit, whichever, pointed towards the middle of the piece. Like if this is your forearm, this is the middle. So your joint would be rounded, pointing in. Again, using just a rectangle or whatever will work, but it's not optimal for aesthetics or for like smoothness of joint posing and all of that. So yeah, go through and do this for each of the channels you need to add this to. Anywhere where you would have a joint that's moving. Once you finish that, your doll is jointed. That's it. That is how you joint the doll. You'll need to test print it probably. That's a whole other thing maybe we'll talk about in a future video. But yeah, you can just smooth out any rough edges. If you're gonna add details, best keep away from the joint sockets at this point. If you need to add details by the joint sockets, just be mindful you may need to cut them out again, or just be insanely careful of how things sit together, not to impede on the joint. But with that, we're done for today. I hope you liked this video. This was probably the most requested one. Also, the other most asked for one is hollowing out the head, and that's going to be, the next video is going to be the head and faces and ears and that stuff we're going to put together. My clay sculpting videos are always pretty popular, and I thought with how much I get asked, I should probably do a little digital sculpting with you guys. If you guys are following along, let me know. But yeah, for now, if you're already subscribed, thanks so much for subscribing. And if you're new here, I hope you like the content and consider subscribing. As always, I hope you have a fantastic day.